You may refuse me as your sister, but I may compel you as your queen. Now tell me what you know.
Ormund Hightower just told Gwaine Hightower that he finally has a piece on the board capable of turning the tide of this war. He said it with the specific, quiet confidence of a man who has been waiting for the right moment and believes that moment has arrived. And the question burning through every book reader and every theory thread right now is the same question: what is that piece? Because if Ormund is right, if this mystery element is what he thinks it is, Rhaenyra's dragon advantage, the thing that has kept the Blacks in this war, could evaporate in a single afternoon at Tumbleton. The Episode 7 trailer just dropped, and it is doing what the best House of the Dragon trailers always do. It shows you enough to make you feel like you understand the shape of what's coming, while hiding the specific details that are going to make the actual episode devastating. We have Aemond at Harrenhal, with 5 potentially viable dragon eggs and 2 of the most symbolically loaded weapons in Targaryen history. We have Rhaenyra standing over a bedridden, heavily pregnant Helaena and telling her that she may refuse her as a sister, but she can be compelled as a queen. We have Daemon in the Vale chasing a wild dragon and a daughter he barely knows. And we have 2 Dragonseed riders whose loyalty has always been personal rather than political, sitting on top of 2 of the most powerful dragons in the war, about to be tested in ways they are not prepared for. Let's go through all of it, because the Battle of Tumbleton is coming, and the trailer is telling you far more about how it's going to go than it wants you to realize. The structural setup is worth establishing before anything else, because this show has a pattern, and the pattern matters. Both Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon have consistently placed their most destructive, most world-altering battles in the penultimate episode of a season, then use the finale to deal with the political and emotional wreckage that the battle creates. Episode 7 is building directly toward Tumbleton, though the engagement itself may be large enough to spill across the episode boundary into Episode 8. Either way, the pieces are moving into position, and the trailer is showing us the final configurations before the board gets flipped. On the Black side, you have the Winter Wolves and the Rivermen, the ground forces that represent real military muscle. Hugh Hammer riding Vermithor, Ulf White on Silverwing. Rhaenyra's dragon advantage in numerical terms looks overwhelming on paper. The Greens have Ormund Hightower's army, Gwaine Hightower present, and seemingly motivated by protecting Daeron rather than personal glory. And Daeron himself with Tessarion, still not fully deployed, still being held in reserve in a way that reads like the show is keeping him back for a specific moment. And then Ormund's piece on the board, the thing that makes him sound like he's already won a war he hasn't fought yet. The book readers in the comments right now are either nodding slowly or actively vibrating, because the piece Ormund is referencing in the source material is one of the most brutal betrayals in the entire Dance of the Dragons. The Dragonseed loyalty question is the wound that is about to open. Hugh Hammer has never been fighting for Rhaenyra. He has been fighting for his wife, for his family's survival, for the personal security that his dragon gives him access to. If someone, anyone, offers him something that better serves those specific motivations, the math changes. And Ulf White's resentment toward Daemon has been building in the background of multiple episodes now, a slow accumulation of slights and dismissals from a man who expected to be treated as an equal, and has consistently been reminded that in this world, equal is not something people like Ulf are permitted to be. Ormund's piece on the board is the possibility that Rhaenyra's greatest military advantage turns around and burns her forces instead. Now let's go to Harrenhal, because what is happening there is operating on an entirely different register than the military conflict at Tumbleton, and the trailer makes clear that both threads are moving toward crisis simultaneously. Aemond in voiceover, talking about a new line of unsullied kings, is the line that requires the most context to fully appreciate. Alys Rivers has been working on him across multiple episodes, not through violence or direct manipulation, but through the oldest form of psychological influence available. She offers him a version of himself that is more than what his family has ever allowed him to be. Not the second son, not the one who lost an eye and got a dragon in its place. A founder, a progenitor, the start of something, rather than the continuation of something that has already decided his value. For a man with Aemond's specific psychological wounds, that offer is extraordinarily dangerous to resist. The 5 dragon eggs are the detail that escalates that danger significantly. He can feel heat coming off the shells. These eggs are viable. In a world where dragon eggs are the most valuable and most politically significant objects imaginable, where a living dragon is the difference between a claimant and a conqueror, Aemond holding 5 potentially hatchable eggs at a site saturated with ancient magic is not a small thing. It is the material foundation for everything Alys has been promising him. A new dynasty does not begin with words, it begins with fire. The Blackfire detail is where the symbolic weight of the Harrenhal storyline becomes fully visible. Aemond is practicing swordplay with Blackfire, the ancestral Valyrian steel sword of Aegon the Conqueror himself. He also carries the Valyrian steel dagger taken from Aegon II after Rook's Rest. Between Vhagar, Blackfire, and the Cat's Paw dagger, Aemond has assembled the symbolic vocabulary of Targaryen kingship without the actual throne. He is wearing the costume of a conqueror in the ruins of the most cursed castle in Westeros, being told by a woman who may or may not be more than human that he was meant for more than his family ever gave him. That is a man who is one significant event away from doing something the history books will remember him for, and not in any of the ways he intends. Alicent arriving at Harrenhal and Alys warning Aemond that his mother has come to do him evil is the confrontation the season has been building toward from the moment their storylines diverged. The relationship between Aemond and Alicent has always been the most psychologically complicated in the Green family. A mother who needed him to be something specific, and a son who has never fully resolved whether her love was genuine or simply instrumental. Alys telling him that the woman who raised him has come to harm him is asking Aemond to make a choice about which version of himself he believes in. The Harrenhal version, the one being built by a woman who has given him visions of a different future, or the one his mother formed, shaped around duty and dynasty and the survival of a house, rather than the fulfillment of an individual. How he handles that confrontation will determine whether Harrenhal becomes his foundation or his cage. The Rhaenyra and Helaena scene is the one that is going to be the emotional center of the episode, regardless of how many dragons are in the air. Rhaenyra standing over a bedridden, heavily pregnant Helaena and saying, "You may refuse me as your sister, but I may compel you as your queen," is the clearest articulation of how badly the war has changed her. This is not the Rhaenyra who spent years being told she had to be more careful, more diplomatic, more aware of how she was perceived. This is a woman who has been ground down to something harder and less patient than she was before, who has decided that the luxury of being gentle is one she can no longer afford. But here is the specific thing that makes this scene more complicated than it appears on the surface. Rhaenyra is not dismissing Helena's visions as madness. She is not speaking to her sister the way the Green Court speaks to her, with condescension or dismissal or the particular cruelty of being treated as ornamental rather than real. Rhaenyra believes her. She wants the truth because she understands, in the way Targaryens who take the old magic seriously have always understood, that Helena's dragon dreams are not symptoms. They are information. She is compelling her sister to share information that could determine the outcome of the war. And that is the tragedy underneath the scene's political surface. Rhaenyra is using Helena's gift as a tool in exactly the way the Green Court has always used Helaena herself, as something to be extracted from, rather than someone to be known. The moral line between the two factions, already blurred, becomes genuinely difficult to locate in that moment. The pregnancy is the detail that makes everything darker. Helaena heavily pregnant in that bed is the show nodding directly toward one of the most devastating threads in the source material, Prince Maelor, and what his existence costs. By forcing Helaena into this scene in this condition, the show is tying Rhaenyra's choices directly to the fate of a child not yet born, and it is doing so in a way that the audience may not fully register until the consequences arrive. What happens when Helaena tells her what she has seen? The curse of prophecy in George R.R. Martin's universe is not that prophecies are wrong. It is that they are right, and that knowing what is coming does not give you the power to prevent it. It only gives you the specific torture of watching the future arrive exactly as predicted. Aemond frozen by the knowledge of his death at the God's Eye, Viserys burdened by the weight of Aegon's dream his entire life. If Helaena tells Rhaenyra what she has seen of the Black Queen's trajectory, she may be handing her sister the worst possible gift: perfect knowledge of a future she cannot change, served in time to ensure maximum suffering. Daemon in the Vale is operating on the timeline pressure that makes military planning almost impossible. He needs dragon riders for Tumbleton. Rhaena has Sheepstealer, or is in the process of claiming Sheepstealer, and she is the connection Daemon has let atrophy through years of absence and indifference. The show has been consistent about the specific nature of Daemon's relationship with his daughters, present when convenient, absent when not, and now arriving when he needs something from her. That dynamic is going to shape how Rhaena responds to whatever he asks of her. And the trailer's suggestion that Sheepstealer may not appear at Tumbleton, even if Daemon does, raises the question of whether his daughter decides to move on her own timeline rather than his. The unidentified thing in the sky that Addam and Baelys see during their aerial patrol is the detail that has two plausible explanations, and both of them are significant. Sunfire surviving near Rook's Rest. We have already seen the evidence of that in previous episodes. The golden dragon, lying still and waiting, would mean Aegon still has his dragon, and the Greens have a capability the Blacks think they have already eliminated. Sheepstealer appearing far from the Vale, in territory where it has no business being, would mean the wild dragon is ranging in ways that nobody has mapped or planned for. Either answer represents a complication Rhaenyra's current fragile psychological state is not equipped to absorb cleanly. Her nervous tapping in the council chamber is the physical tell that the show uses to mark how far she has traveled from the composed, strategic queen she was trying to be. It is a small gesture carrying enormous weight because it shows a mind that cannot stop moving even when the body is still. A leader running the same calculations on a loop and not arriving at results she can live with. The dragon balance heading into Tumbleton looks overwhelming for the Blacks on paper, and genuinely uncertain once you factor in the human element. Numbers and size matter in dragon warfare, but loyalty matters more. Vermithor is enormous, Silverwing is significant, but Hugh Hammer's wife is still unaccounted for in terms of her safety, and Ulf White has been treated as a lesser thing by people who depend on him being willing to die for their cause. Ormund's piece on the board does not need to be another dragon. It only needs to be the right person saying the right thing at the right moment to the right Dragonseed. The Battle of Tumbleton in the source material is one of the most psychologically complex military engagements in Fire and Blood, specifically because the decisive factor is not firepower or ground forces or tactical positioning. It is the moral and emotional state of people who were never fully committed to the cause they were fighting for. The show has spent multiple episodes carefully establishing exactly why those commitments are fragile. Episode 7 appears to be the moment those fragile commitments get tested against real pressure for the first time. So here is what I need from you. Ormund's piece on the board, have you figured out what it is? And if you have, are you prepared for what that means for the second half of this season? And the Rhaenyra and Helaena scene, does compelling her sister for prophecy cross a moral line for you? Or do you understand it as the desperate calculation of a queen who is out of options? Drop everything in the comments, because this episode is coming fast, and I want to be in this conversation with you before it airs.